In July 1518, a woman known as Frau Troffea stepped into a narrow street in Strasbourg and began to dance. There was no music, no celebration, just a silent, frantic movement that lasted for hours. By the end of the week, 34 others had joined her. Within a month, the number grew to 400. People were not just dancing, they were collapsing from exhaustion, their feet bleeding, their hearts failing. This was the Strasbourg dancing plague. But was this a collective trance triggered by extreme misery, or a case of biological poisoning? Let's stay with what's certain as we peel back the layers of this medieval nightmare. When we look at events this strange, it is easy to dismiss them as folklore or local legend. However, the Strasbourg dancing plague is one of the best documented cases of mass behavior in history. The city council records of 1518, the sermons of local priests, and even the notes of visiting physicians all tell the same harrowing story. These were not just people having a party. The documents describe a contagion of movement. At its peak, the chronicles suggest that up to 15 people were dying every single day. What's usually overlooked here is that the authorities didn't treat this as a crime or a sin initially. They treated it as a medical emergency. They were desperate. The records show the city even banned public gambling and prostitution, fearing that divine wrath was behind the dancing. But the dancing didn't stop. It intensified. This leads us to ask, what could possibly drive a human body to move until it literally breaks? Let's stay with what's certain. The city was terrified, and their solution was perhaps the strangest part of the entire ordeal. In a move that defies modern logic, the Strasbourg authorities decided that the only way to cure the dancers was to help them keep dancing. They consulted local physicians who diagnosed the affliction as hot blood. According to the medical science of the time, the dancers simply needed to shake the illness out of their systems. And this is where it gets interesting. The city council actually paid for a wooden stage to be constructed in the horse market. They went further. They hired professional pipers and drummers to provide a constant rhythm. They even employed strong men to hold up the dancers when they began to faint, keeping them upright and moving. It was a government-sponsored marathon of death. Unsurprisingly, this cure was a disaster. The music and the stage only served to attract more people into the frantic circle. Instead of burning out the illness, they provided a platform for it to spread. It wasn't until the city reversed its decision, banning music and forcing the dancers into a local shrine, that the momentum finally began to slow. But the question remains, what was the biological or psychological engine driving this? One of the most persistent theories points toward the very bread the people of Strasbourg ate. Ergotism is caused by a fungus called Claviceps purpurea, which grows on damp rye, a staple of the medieval diet. This fungus contains alkaloids related to modern LSD. When consumed, it can cause St. Anthony's fire, a condition marked by agonizing burning sensations, gangrene, and convulsive movements. Could the dancers have been tripping on a massive citywide scale? It's a compelling idea. The year 1518 was preceded by several wet seasons, which are perfect for ergot growth. However, there is a problem with this explanation. While ergot can cause tremors and hallucinations, it also restricts blood flow to the limbs. Most people suffering from severe ergotism would find it physically impossible to dance for days on end. Their limbs would likely be blackening from gangrene. Furthermore, ergot-induced movements are usually characterized by painful, uncoordinated spasms, not the rhythmic, sustained dancing described by the Strasbourg witnesses. What's usually overlooked here is that the victims weren't just twitching. They were performing complex movements for an incredibly long duration. If it wasn't a fungus in the rye, we have to look deeper into the human mind itself. If the cause wasn't biological, we must consider the environment of 1518. Strasbourg was a city on the edge. In the years leading up to the plague, the region had been devastated by poor harvests, skyrocketing grain prices, and the arrival of new terrifying diseases like syphilis. The people were living in a state of extreme chronic stress. This brings us to the theory of mass psychogenic illness, or what used to be called mass hysteria. In this scenario, a group of people under intense pressure enters a dissociative state. But why dancing? This is where the cultural context becomes vital. The people of the time believed in Saint Vitus, a martyr who supposedly had the power to curse sinners by forcing them to dance. When Frau Troffea began her movements, those watching didn't see a medical patient. They saw a divine curse in action. The fear of that curse, combined with the psychological breakdown caused by famine, may have triggered a collective trance. It was a psychic contagion where the brain, pushed to its limit, sought an escape through movement. But even this theory has its gaps. Could the human mind really sustain such physical exertion without a biological catalyst? So we are left with two conflicting possibilities. On one hand, we have the ergotism theory, a biological poisoning that explains the sudden onset but fails to account for the stamina and rhythm of the dancers. On the other, we have mass psychogenic illness, a psychological breakdown that fits the cultural climate but seems almost too powerful to believe. Let's stay with what's certain. Neither explanation is perfect. Modern science has tried to reconcile them, suggesting perhaps a small amount of ergot acted as the spark, while the mass hysteria provided the fuel. But there is no mention in the records of the other symptoms of ergotism, like the characteristic screaming or the loss of toes and fingers. And mass hysteria usually affects smaller, closed groups, not hundreds of people in the open streets of a major city. And this is where it gets interesting. The plague ended as mysteriously as it began. By late September, the dancers were gone and the city returned to its grim, quiet routine. We are looking back through 500 years of dust, trying to find a single answer for a phenomenon that may have been a perfect storm of biology, culture, and despair. The Strasbourg dancing plague remains a chilling reminder of how little we truly understand about the intersection of the human mind and body. Whether it was the result of a toxic fungus or a collective psychological collapse, it shows us that under enough pressure, the social fabric can simply unravel. The archivist is often asked if something like this could happen today. While we no longer fear the curse of Saint Vitus, we are not immune to mass behaviors or the effects of extreme environmental stress. What's usually overlooked is that the people of 1518 were not primitive. They were humans responding to an intolerable reality in the only way their culture allowed. We may never know the exact chemical or psychological trigger that set Frau Troffea in motion. But we do know that for one strange summer, a city forgot how to walk and learned only how to dance, until it died. The records are there, the mystery remains. What do you think was the true cause? Thank you for joining me in the depths of the archive today. History is rarely as clean as the textbooks suggest, and the dancing plague of 1518 is proof that some of the strangest stories are the ones we can actually document. If you enjoy weighing the evidence and exploring the layers of the past, consider subscribing to Hidden Layer. There are many more records to uncover. Until next time, stay skeptical and keep looking for what's certain.